Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. Don't adjust your screen. All three of us are here, and if we all look a little hot, that's because it's the sweltering part of summer. It's our first 90-degree day here, which makes me the coolest, I think, of the lot. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen.
No, it's actually not too bad here. I just didn't turn on the air in my studio. Forgot to tell my wife while I was at work, hey, go turn on the air because it's separate from the house. So it's not too bad. But if you start to hear a little roaring thunder in the background and I start to look a little peaked, it's because I turned around and kicked on the AC behind me.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's hot. It's a real feel of 118. So, it's just a normal winter day in Texas. Nothing we're not used to. People dying. Heat everywhere, can't move. It's not fun. It's horrible.
You just got to get you some eggs, start throwing them on the hood of your car, save yourself some
the eggs have disintegrated by the time you throw them toward the car. It's that hot outside.
You're muted, Matt.
My biggest issue is I almost had to put myself in concussion protocol yesterday when I was moving a stack of chairs and put it right into my orbital.
Some people do anything to get out of work.
I did not leave work, but I thought I broke my face for a minute. Went full Mike Tyson there. Speaking of attacks and wars, this off-season battle between the Bengals and the Chiefs just keeps getting more exciting. Joe Burrow was first to get asked questions, was pretty deferential, and then his teammate Jamar Chase said Mahomes who. Mahomes responded with his ring pictures. Now Travis Kelce warning Jamar Chase never to disrespect Patrick Mahomes. So let me ask you guys, does this make you more or less excited for their games during the season?
More. Why not? There'll be some trash talk leading up. There'll be some, who knows? Maybe they re-signed Vontaze Burfict. And get it to be really exciting. I don't know. It's just boys being boys, talking shit. I mean, we're not that soft. Just let them talk some crap. They do it on the field. They're doing it in the media a little bit. I don't think they dislike each other by any stretch. I think they're just having fun. They're supporting their guys. One of them just happens to have a couple Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, it's trash talk. It's all fun and games. I mean, yeah, it'll make I don't know if it'll make the matchup that much more fun because it's not like they're going to go against each other. Like Travis Kelce and Mahomes aren't technically going up against Jamar Chase. They're just trying to outscore Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. I actually feel worse for Joe Burrow. I feel like Jamar Chase is cashing a check or writing a check that Joe Burrow has to cash, unfortunately, or at least Travis Kelce and Mahomes, they can affect each other's play. But I'm sure it'll make for a lot more fun. I'm sure in the first game that they play each other, I know they play each other in the regular season this year, the media will be talking about it the entire lead up the whole week. They'll dredge it all back up, and it's whatever. It's a fun storyline, but I don't think it affects the game at all.
I'm just kind of the only thing I enjoy is it feels like this has kind of taken over as one of the best rivalries in the NFL right now. You know, a couple of young quarterbacks, a couple of good, strong AFC contenders. When we did our power rankings, all of us had these as pretty much the top two teams in the AFC. So it should be fun going into the season. Well, we're going to continue our preview tour going to the NFC West, and we will start at the top with the San Francisco 49ers. In 2022, they were 13-4, first in the NFC West, lost in the NFC Championship game. Key additions this offseason, if you can call it that, they picked up quarterback Sam Darnold. They got Javon Hargraves at defensive tackle and Cleveland Farrell at defensive end. Key losses, Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback, left to go to the Raiders. Mike McGlinchey, right tackle, went to the Broncos. And safety Jimmy Ward went to the Texans. They did not have picks in the first or second round, but in the third round, they got Jair Brown. I'd ask Matt again because he watches more college, but we know he doesn't pronounce things.
Jair Brown, but I could.
Jair Brown, the safety Cameron Letau, tight end, and they of course took a kicker, Jake Moody, in the third round, which I just found fascinating. No picks first two rounds. Third round, they have a couple picks, and they decided to go kicker. Fantasy assets, quarterback Brock Purdy may or may not be ready week one, finished as QB 33 last season despite only appearing in 9 games and starting 5. Sam Darnold, who started about half the season for the Panthers, finished as QB 36 last year. Christian McCaffrey, who came over from the Panthers midseason, finished as RB2 last year. Elijah Mitchell, who was injured much of the season, finished as RB 78. Those are the running backs. At wide receiver, Deebo Samuel was wide receiver 38. Brandon Ayuk was wide receiver 15, and Juwan Jennings was wide receiver 90 last year. At tight end, George Kittle was tight end 3, and Ross Dwelly, who re-signed, was tight end 79. So, Matt, I'll start with you. What are your fantasy expectations for the 49ers, and who do you think will get a majority of the snaps at quarterback?
Yeah, the quarterback position is kind of the big one here, right? We really want to know, and I think preseason, once we get into the camps here, is going to be a big thing. I do think Trey Lance is probably, if he's healthy, will likely be the starter because they know they can't go back to Brock Purdy again. He didn't have Tommy John surgery, but he had a version of it. Again, we've talked about it before. Being a massive baseball fan that I am, I know the kind of amount of rehab it takes to get back from that. And I know Big Ben had a similar surgery. I think he went full Tommy John, and we saw how much torque that took out of his arm. And I don't think it's unfair to say that Brock Purdy does not have the arm even that Big Ben Roethlisberger had before the surgery. So I'll be very curious to see how Purdy bounces back from that. Because of that, I expect Trey Lance to be the starter, which makes this offense very intriguing. We haven't really seen, we've seen a very small sample size in which he had some very good moments and some very bad moments. What I do trust in is Kyle Shanahan. He is an incredible play caller. He knows how to get the ball to his weapons and knows how to make them look good. I would expect when you're looking at the fantasy upside of this offense, you still believe in Christian McCaffrey because he's just that damn talented. He's an absolute stud, and as long as he stays healthy, he's likely going to be one of the best running backs again this year. The receiving game is where things are interesting to me. We've seen Deebo get used all over the field, which probably makes him the sexier asset, I guess, for fantasy because, you know, even if he's not doing a lot in the receiving game, they'll use him in jet sweeps. They'll get him the ball running it. I kind of think this is or at least I hope that they continue to expand on what Brandon Ayuk did toward the end of last year. Seems like he always has really good end of seasons, but can't carry it over to the next season. I'll be curious to see if he can do that this year. And then George Kittle, I just don't know what to think. I mean, he's been a stud when he's healthy, but it seems like he's on the field less and less now because of injury. So I don't know what to think. I guess if you're betting on anybody, it's probably CMC and Deebo. But I really want to see who's going to be the starting quarterback when camps roll around. I think that's going to be the biggest determination for this offense.
Yeah, there's two very, very separate and divided camps on what's going on with the San Francisco quarterback situation. Looking at the Dynasty Nerds ADP, they have Trey Lance at QB 22 and Brock Purdy at QB 26 and Darnold at QB 36. 39 for Darnold. And so I'm not sure if I if I feel like, well, we're not catching up because we keep hearing Purdy is going to be ready, or do we just have a bunch of Trey Lance zealots that are buying into that draft capital and that athletic profile that he brings to the table, and the belief that it doesn't really matter who they put at quarterback? They're going to run Kyle Shanahan's offense the way Kyle Shanahan wants it to be ran. And I mean, to be fair, Trey Lance has been in that offense for what, 3 years now? I got to believe he knows the offense pretty well.
This will be his third year.
Okay. So I got to believe he knows the offense pretty well at this point. And so if he gets the nod, I feel like he's going to go out and he's going to be able to perform. So I'm torn because, teams are cutting their losses more than they used to. And would it really surprise anybody if they just decided to, cut their losses on Lance and trade him off for, a fifth round pick or something just to move him because they believe that Purdy is healthy and going to be back and that Darnold can be a sufficient backup? No, and I don't know what that does for Lance, where he lands. But it also, I don't think it would surprise anybody if Purdy isn't quite ready week 1 and Lance goes out there and shows why they traded up to number 3 to get him. So from a startup draft perspective, I don't want either of them as anything other than my QB3. And honestly, if I can get both of them and see who wins it, that's really the way I want to go.
Yeah, I think quarterback's tough. Everything that they talk about says that if Brock Purdy is available, that's who they're going to. And if he's not, Sam Darnold is who they're going to, which is interesting to me. Still, you have to think if Brock Purdy is not actually available, they're going to give Lance some kind of a shot because, they spent 3 first-round picks to go up and get him. And I honestly don't think they're likely to trade him for a couple reasons. First, San Francisco has proven time and again the last few years under Shanahan they need 2 or 3 quarterbacks because they'll probably play them all. And the other reason is I don't think they can get back anything close to the value they put in at this point in time. And I don't know if they're in such a desperate situation because he's on that rookie contract that, really hasn't kicked in too much. He's going into year 3. They don't have to make any hard decisions about a 5th-year option until next summer. I think you just roll with a guy who's not that expensive, that gives you some depth and some options. And, his trade value may be even better mid-season if it turns out the 49ers are rolling great with Brock Purdy and somebody else who's a potential contender loses a quarterback. So I don't see him moving to start the season. I loved the acquisition of McCaffrey. I think he does great there. Matt mentioned about Kittle. Kittle actually played more games than Deebo Samuel last year. He actually made it through 15 games. But he is always kind of that injury risk. I thought Latau was an interesting pickup. Obviously, they're trying to find something to see if they have an interesting backup tight end. I also think the acquisition to me of McCaffrey limited a little bit of what they were doing with Deebo Samuel because his when he was really thriving fantasy-wise, was because he was one of their primary running backs and he was catching all these passes, and I think injuries caught up with him. McCaffrey really seems like he's kind of taking that role, catching a lot of passes and rushing, and they're using Deebo in different ways. So that's why I'll kick to the next question, which is our best fantasy value. I'll kick it off. I think to me it's Brandon Ayuk, who last year played 17 games, finished as wide receiver 15, and is currently going as wide receiver 29. Dennis, what is your favorite value?
So I'm torn because right now Elijah Mitchell's going at RB 48, so that's cheap. And we've seen Christian McCaffrey get injured. And when he does, whoever is his backup steps in and performs. But I'm not going to bank on that. I know that McCaffrey is a risk. He's older. Ayuk is going at wide receiver 25 and Deebo at wide receiver 26 right now. And to me, that just screams Brandon Ayuk. You know, I agree with you. I think McCaffrey impacts what Debo does, and Debo has to then become more of a traditional wide receiver with McCaffrey on the field. That being said, I don't think that's a problem for Debo. I just think there's one ball, and when you have Christian McCaffrey, he gets it a lot. And I understand that Ayuk is good and Kittle is good and Samuel is good, but that's Christian McCaffrey, and he's going to get it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to go differently than you guys, but I do think it's Brandon Ayuk. I mentioned how he played well toward the end of last year. I mean, 81 yards, 101, and then 59 were his last couple games, a touchdown in a couple of those as well. Finished, typically, where was his overall last year? Does anybody know what his overall was? I was trying to find it, but I can't.
He was wide receiver 15.
15 overall. So, I mean, you're getting him at a discount as it is. As I mentioned, he really looked much better at times toward the end of the season. A lot of it was with Brock Purdy too, right? Like obviously Purdy took over, what was it, week 11?
He appeared in 9 games. He started the last 5, so it would have been probably week 12.
So week 12, I mean, again, I think you have to be a little bit concerned with Trey Lance because we haven't seen him consistently be able to run an offense. But again, if you're betting on Kyle Shanahan, which I would do, I think Brandon Ayuk's going to be the one, which likely gets him. Or if he's not, as Dennis mentioned, with the attention Debo draws, Brandon Ayuk should get favorable coverage, which hopefully means he gets the ball. I mean, he would be the guy that I'm in on because I just think everybody else is going at their value, that it would just be hard for me to argue that they're the better play.
So the 49ers, have been very competitive the last couple of years going to NFC Championship games. They seem like they're going into this season probably head and shoulders above the rest of their division, unlike previous years. So Matt, it's that time. How do you think the 49ers finish this year?
I mean, it might be insane to say, but I honestly think they could finish 13-4, 14-3. It all hinges on that quarterback position. When we did our power rankings, I actually had them as the number 2 team. I had the Eagles and the 49ers as my top 2 teams overall. I didn't even have an AFC team in there. They have just a solid all-around team, great coaching. Like I said, maybe the defense takes a step back in losing DeMeco Ryans. But we thought that was going to happen when they lost Robert Salah, and that didn't happen. DeMeco Ryan stepped in and did phenomenal. Like, they just do such a great job in that coaching staff of replacing the next guy up. They all run almost, I don't want to say the same system, but a lot of it is the same kind of personnel out there, and they're running a lot of the same stuff. It's such a good team. It really just comes down to the quarterback position. If they can get that figured out, I mean, no, Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. Like, who's the last person we've seen play that well being that late? Tom Brady. And I'm not trying to say that Brock Purdy is going to be a Hall of Famer because he's probably not. But I think that should just give you more, or give Kyle Shanahan more credit what he was able to do with the quarterback that clearly they even did not think was going to be that good because everybody passed on him upwards of 10 times because when you count the supplemental pick. So, I mean, everybody passed on him, yet they were still able to take him into the playoffs and be very good. And they probably are going to the Super Bowl if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt in that game. Like, they look like the better team, in my opinion. They just couldn't do anything. They didn't have a quarterback. They're a very good team. There's not many. They have a very easy schedule. I mean, I think picking 3 games, and the 3 games I picked were the Bengals, Cowboys, Vikings. Maybe they lose a game in schedule. I mean, they get the Buccaneers, the Cardinals twice, the Commanders, the Rams twice, the Giants, who could be okay. Like, they get 2 of possibly the worst teams in the NFL this year, in the Cardinals and the Rams twice. That should be 4 easy wins. I expect them to probably be the number 1 seed in the NFC this year.
I'm not quite as bullish on them. I've got them at 12-5. I actually have them losing their opener at Pittsburgh. They're traveling east, and quarterback questions going into the season. Maybe it's Lance, maybe it's Purdy, maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. It's but I've got them losing that first one. I also got them, and this is week 6. I picked a homer pick. I picked the Browns to beat them at home. And then the Vikings week 7. I actually have them with a 3-game losing streak going into their bye, losing to the Browns, the Vikings. And then I've got the Bengals going out there and beating them. I just think the Bengals, the Bengals defense against that offense will do well enough. And Joe Burrow just has that it factor. And I think they'll squeeze that out. I also have them losing to the Eagles in Philadelphia. Seems like there was one other one. I thought I had them losing to the. No, that's it. That's 5. So, I think they're going to be good. And could they be the number 1 seed? They could be. I feel like they're going to be in that fight for the 2nd or 3rd seed, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think anywhere in the 11 to 14 win range makes sense. I think they'll easily win their division. We'll get to Seattle in a minute, but I don't have super high expectations there. And we'll get to the other 2 later, but based on our power rankings, I think all of us think the Cardinals might be in line for the number 1 overall pick. So I don't think they'll have as much of a challenge in the NFC West as they've had in previous years. I think they're, like Matt said, they're one of the best all-around teams in every phase. Some of it depends on health, but then again, to me, some of it, that health question almost seems irrelevant because we've seen them lose massive amounts of players at key positions like running back, quarterback, all along the defense, receivers, tight end throughout the last few seasons. And they just seem to keep on trucking. They've been in back-to-back NFC championships. Can they get over the hump into the Super Bowl? I don't know, but I really think it's the Eagles and the 49ers are the class of the NFC. And to me, there's a pretty big gap. As much as I like Dallas, there's a pretty big gap before you get to the next best team in the NFC. And there's nothing about the way the 49ers offseason has gone that makes me feel any different. So that'll do it for the 49ers. Moving on to the team that was number 2 in the West last year. That's the Seattle Seahawks. They finished 9-8, second in the NFC West last year, lost in the wild card round. Key additions, they got Draymond Jones at defensive end. They brought back Bobby Wagner at linebacker, got Devin Bush at linebacker. Key losses, Rashad Penny, the running back, went to the Eagles. Kyle Fuller, their center, went to the Broncos. Cody Barton, their linebacker, went to Washington. They went pretty hard in the draft. They got Devin Witherspoon, a cornerback, with their first pick, and then they got Jackson Smith and Jigba, a wide receiver, and Zach Charbonnet at running back. So really adding some depth and some good players to key fantasy positions. Among their fantasy assets, Geno Smith was comeback player of the year last year, finished as quarterback 5. He is back on a new deal. At running back, Ken Walker III was running back 18 as a rookie, and also they have Charbonnet back there. In the wide receiver room, DK Metcalf finished as wide receiver 16. Tyler Lockett finished as wide receiver 13. Both of them are back, and JSN joins them there. And at tight end, Noah Fant was tight end 17. Will Dissly was tight end 28. So, Dennis, I'll start with you. What are your fantasy expectations for the Seahawks, and what do you make of the running back and wide receiver rooms?
So they definitely have some talent. The big issue is how are they going to use it? Kenneth Walker seems, to be fair, he seems to be more explosive than Zach Charbonnet, but Charbonnet is the bigger, more powerful, better pass-catching back. And so a lot of the things that Walker does, Charbonnet can do also, but it's a toss-up. I think it's going to be a team that does run the ball a lot, which doesn't bode well for the passing game assets. Geno was QB5 last year. He's going off the board right now at QB 19. I think that's a decent pick there if you're getting him at QB 19. I feel like he's probably been going higher, but in the Nerds ADP, that's where he's sitting right now. Walker, though, is going off at RB 8, and I just feel like the Charbonnet pick hasn't caught up with him yet. Charbonnet is going off the board at RB24. With Walker finishing as RB18, it feels like they're set up to be a combination of a mid-range RB2 and a high-end RB3 based on how much Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. DK Metcalf he's probably the best wide receiver on that team. What he does, him and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think are going to complement each other really well. But drafters have been writing off Tyler Lockett, and he's going at wide receiver 46. And to me, that is a travesty. I think Tyler Lockett has a lot left in the tank. I think he'll be the wide receiver too. Now, I get it. Smith and Jigba and Metcalf are young, and this is Dynasty ADP. But Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 46 he's still got a good couple of years. I think he's going to stay ahead of Smith and Jigba this year. I don't know what they're doing at tight end there. They've got Noah Fant and Will Dissly. I don't think either one of them are really values. We don't know what they're going to do. There's no consistency, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, much like the 49ers, it really kind of comes down to the quarterback again. I mean, Geno Smith had a resurgent year last year, looked like a quarterback we had never seen in the NFL. Has this amazing season, which everybody kind of benefited from. Kenneth Walker came in as a rookie and had an amazing season. Can they repeat that? I think adding a guy like Jackson Smith and Jigba to the room is a good thing. It just makes that wide receiver core even deadlier, at least for the wide receivers. I actually think it probably hurts Noah Fant and Will Dissly, unfortunately, a little bit, adding a guy like JSN in there. DK Metcalf, an absolute stud. Tyler Lockett, very good as well. I'll be interested to see what he does this year. I kind of agree with Dennis. I don't think he's going anywhere, but they do have a fairly cheap out after this season. So this may be his last year with the Seahawks, but I expect it to be very productive. The running back room is good. I know, obviously, for some fantasy, we don't love that they drafted Zach Charbonnet that early. But it's probably a good thing for both of those guys. Neither one of those guys gets massively beat up, or if one of them does suffer an injury, you have a guy who can step right in and probably be a top 12 running back for you in fantasy. So the depth of this team is there. It's a really good team. Again, it really just all comes down to, can Geno Smith, he doesn't even have to, in my opinion, be as good as he was last year finishing as QB5, but can he finish even as a top 15 quarterback? Because I think if he does that, this offense is still going to be very good, and so will those wide receivers.
Yeah, and it will be interesting. Dennis mentioned he thinks the Seahawks will be more run heavy. They actually hadn't been the last couple of years, but now with two pretty solid running backs, will they kind of revert back more? The Seahawks seem to be year in, year out one of the toughest teams to try to figure out. I think at this time last year, all of us thought they were getting ready to bottom out. And instead, they looked really good at the beginning and sort of faded down the stretch, which gives me pause. I like the young pieces they went and got, but I don't know how much we're going to see that impact them this year. When you look at it, Lockett actually finished as the better receiver last year, but I don't know that he can repeat that because I think, we're probably going to see Lockett and Metcalf as the more primary targets at the beginning of the season, but I don't think any of us would be surprised if JSN and Metcalf are more of the primary targets by the end of the season. As you mentioned, they have that out for Lockett. We know by rumors that they had Lockett up for trade earlier this offseason and just couldn't find the right deal. So I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see a changing of the guard. Same thing in the running back room. What is the splits going to be? Dennis gave the ADP for Dynasty Nerds, but I was just looking at the Fantasy Pros ADP, and they have in PPR, they have Lockett as wide receiver 33, JSN as wide receiver 34. Running backs, Walker going as running back 17, which doesn't feel that bad, and Charbonnet going as running back 33, which I think means they just don't know exactly what to make of that split. So I'm not even sure ADP-wise, as we start to swing toward redraft season, we're seeing great values right now in any of those positions either, which brings me back to you, Matt. What is your pick for who you're targeting for value?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably have to go with either. It, it's got to be JSN, or at least for me, it's JSN or Tyler Lockett. Why I'd probably argue JSN is right now he's technically going as the cheapest of the three, and he's going to be there for probably, or at least through his rookie contract. I don't imagine they're going to trade him beforehand. Where again, while there is some assumption going on here, and you don't ever love to just assume things, there's a realistic shot that Tyler Lockett's not there anymore. If you do want to go on the side of things that Dennis said where they're going to run the ball out, though, I think Zach Charbonnet might probably be the best. I mean, RB34, if you go back through Seattle and what they've done over the past couple of years, I mean, they do a pretty good job of splitting the reps between two guys, sometimes 3 or 4 guys. And I think the fact that they're adding in a guy like Zach Charbonnet with Kenneth Walker, but we know Kenneth Walker has his own injuries that he's dealt with. I mean, you have to go all the way back to, 2019 to find a time when there was a pretty decent split between the running back one and the rest of them. Chris Carson got 278 attempts, and the next closest was Rashad Penny at 65. Even CJ Prosise, who got 23. Now, Russell Wilson had 75 attempts. So, I mean, he's not going to be there. I don't know that Geno Smith's going to be running the ball a lot. For me, it's JSN or Zach Charbonnet. Take your pick on however you think the offense is going to go, but those would be the two that I'd bet on.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm probably not taking Lockett as a value if I'm doing a dynasty draft, but he's a great guy to go get if you are competing and you're trying to go and make that title run. Let me see here. I just pulled up Mike Clay's projections. So he's got Metcalf with 121 targets, Lockett with 110, and Jackson Smith and Jigba with 92. So he's got Geno throwing it 536 times. That's a respectable amount. 224 rushing attempts for Walker, 136 for Charbonnet. I think I feel like that those numbers seem reasonable, but those targets just seem high for those top 3 wide receivers. It's very evenly distributed between 90 and 110. I'd love to see one of them step up and just become that guy that gets 160 targets. I don't think we'll ever see that with Pete Carroll, especially not when he's got guys this good. So if I'm competing, if I'm running for a title, I think Tyler Lockett can be had pretty cheap. I do think Zach Charbonnet is the running back I want out of these two, and he is the cheaper back.
It's just so disappointing because I feel like 2.5 months ago, people were talking about Ken Walker as a top 5 dynasty running back now. But I'm kind of with you. I think Lockett, especially for this year, people are kind of looking past him, and I would bet at the beginning part of the season he'll be pretty strong too. Especially in redraft, I think that's a guy you can get later that will end up being a value. So the Seahawks last year, 9-8, they looked much better than that in the first part of the season, then kind of faded down and just barely made the playoffs. Arguably, I would have rather have seen the Lions based on how the season was wrapping up. So, Dennis, last year we weren't real high on the Seahawks, and Geno Smith and Pete Carroll kind of proved us wrong. Are you more bullish on them this year?
I'm not more bullish on Geno, no. I feel like the QB 19 ranking where he is in Dynasty Nerds, maybe it's a few spots low, but I think he's a little more mobile. Derek Carr, maybe not quite as good a passer. Not buying last year's Mirage.
Oh, I wasn't sure if there was anything else. I think that they probably finished somewhere around the same. For me, they don't have a super tough schedule. We just talked about, the 49ers easy schedule. They obviously have to play the 49ers. If you assume they split one of those, they do get the Eagles, which will likely be a tough game. I consider the Browns a tough game. Bengals, Lions. It's only 5 games right there. Again, I think they have a built-in advantage in getting to play, in my opinion, 2 of the worst teams in the NFL this year, in the Cardinals and the Rams twice. And assuming they're able to take care of their business, they also get the Commanders. Ravens should be a tough game too. I didn't realize the Ravens were on there. So it's going to be tough for them. I don't think they have as good a team as this 49ers do to just say, hey, like they should run through their schedule. But I would not be surprised if they finished 9-8 again. I feel like that's a fair 9-8, maybe even 8-9 if Geno takes a step back. But I still think that team is very good. Pete Carroll's been a really good coach. Like I was the guy who I think I had him when I first ran through the schedule, not winning a game last year, and then I adjusted it just to give him 2 wins, and they proved me dead wrong. I'm gonna believe it until I see the wheels fall off that they can do it again.
Go ahead.
I wasn't thinking about the record when I was giving my last soliloquy, but when I went and looked, I actually have them going 8-9. So I have them going winning 1 less game than they did last year.
And to me, I think that's really the range, like 8 to 10 wins. They'll probably be hanging around in that wild card sort of race competition. I think we're waiting to see what happens with some of those NFC South teams, what happens with 3 of the teams in the NFC North, and then we know there's a couple good teams in the East and 1 really good one in the West, and then it's going to be a huge group of teams, I think, just like last year, fighting for a spot, and they definitely have a chance. The way they faded down the stretch last year gives me a little bit of pause in thinking that they could be better than that. And I guess I wouldn't be shocked if they ended up with like 7 wins, but I really think like 8-9 is probably the right range, right around midpoint. And then I think the question becomes, how long does Pete Carroll keep hanging on? We thought he was getting closer to the end last year, but he just keeps coming back.
He's a lifer, man.
You mean you think he's going to die on the sideline?
Like Sonny Weaver, right?
Everything comes back to draft day.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that a draft day reference I don't get?
It is.
It is, yeah.
Someday I'll watch that movie.
I mean, I'm surprised, since this didn't take very long, I'm surprised you've never seen Draft Day.
It's a good movie for what it
is.
I don't
a good
understand
movie.
What people hate about it. Obviously, some of that stuff doesn't actually happen in real life, but it's a good movie for what it is.
It's just been I don't watch a lot of movies, and I never really have, and so I just never. It's one of those I never got around to it. Like I've never seen The Godfather sober, so I really can't tell you anything about it.
That's arguably like the greatest trilogy of all time, but
well, 2 great films and 1 film that exists.
Hey, you know what? The third one's not bad enough to ruin the first 2, though. In my opinion,
it's not bad enough, but it's sometimes it's more fun to just pretend there's 2 really great movies.
I don't mind the third as much.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. Dennis, if the people have some time on their hands and they've just putting off watching Draft Day and The Godfather, what can they do to fill those hours?
They can type their way over to their little favorite podcast platform, and they can give us a subscribe, a like, a rating, a review, all that fun stuff. Download, listen to us while you're doing your summer yard work, hanging out by the pool, pretending you're listening to your significant other. Pop us in the earbud there. They'll never know.
Sage advice there. We will be back on Friday with the second half of the NFC West, and I think it is fair to call it the back half. I don't think any of us have super high expectations for the Rams and the Cardinals, but you never know. There might be a surprise, so you can tune in for that. Till then, enjoy your week.
See ya.